Every once in a while, you can see the coordinated talking points show up. Now, oftentimes, and this may also be the case, it's not that there's some sort of back room where everybody gets together and starts saying the same thing. It's one person says it, then another person says it, and oh, well, that sounds good. I'm going to say it too. But this is one of those curious times where it happens so quickly, so suddenly. I suspect there is an email list serve somewhere with a bunch of progressives and reporters together, and they have coordinated their talking point, and they should be embarrassed. I'm talking about the response to the parental rights and education law in Florida. I want to read you some headlines. All of these headlines have appeared in the last 24 hours. This is from the Washington Post politics section. The new Red Scare, the right leans into pedophilia allegations. This is from the Washington Post education section. Teachers who mention sexuality are grooming kids, conservatives say. This is from Vice News. Conservatives are smearing Don't Say Gay opponents as pedophile groomers. This is from The Week. Why are Republicans so concerned about grooming? This is from New York Magazine. Why Republicans are smearing everyone as pedophiles now. And this is from MSNBC. The QAnon part out loud, GOP smears political opponents as pro-pedophile. All of this in the last 24 hours. These are headlines from various news outlets, all in the last 24 hours. CNN as well ran one. And the basic gist of these headlines is that Republicans are calling anyone who opposes the Parental Rights and Education Act in Florida a groomer or a pedophile. Now, I got a couple of things that need to be said here. Number one, you notice I said the Parental Rights and Education law. The left and the media together have called it the Don't Say Gay bill for the last 2 months. That's a misstatement of what the law actually does. Also, you should know that a majority of parents, including within the Democratic Party, agree with the intent of the law, which is that you won't teach sex and gender issues until 4th grade. You're not teaching anal sex in kindergarten under the law, which, by the way, you should know had happened. My buddy Leon Wolf writes about this, and by the way, there's another one out there. The groomer talk is just warmed over 1970s homophobia returned. There's not much more to it. What's so interesting here is you have a bunch of people on the left saying that if Republicans reference groomers, they're talking about gay men. There's your homophobia to connect the two there. My buddy Leon Wolf has this Twitter thread. It's worth reading it. The entire reason we are here is because of journalistic dishonesty. The widespread malpractice and coverage of the parental rights and education legislation in Florida is the real reason for this animus. First off, any journalist who refers to this bill as Don't Say Gay, or who knows that others refer to it this way, without also noting that the description is objectively false, is too lazy or too dishonest to listen to. It's important to ask, then why did people come up with this label and apply it to the bill? The answer is that its opponents did not want people to know that they are opposing what the bill actually does. And that is because the main function of the bill is to prevent public school instruction on sex and sexuality to kids aged 5 to 8. That, you can probably guess, is a wildly popular position to anyone who's been a parent. This applies, by the way, to parents who do not care if their kids are gay or not. Age 5 is simply too young for a random stranger assigned by a school district to teach your child about sex. End of story, regardless of the sexuality involved. The opponents of this bill did not want it known that they are opposing this, so instead, they smeared the bill's proponents as homophobic by lying and calling it the Don't Say Gay law. And the media has carried their water almost unanimously. Now, a lot of people opposing this law do not want public school teachers actually teaching kindergartners about sex or sexuality. They've been led to falsely believe the Don't Say Gay BS and think they're opposing it. They don't deserve to be called groomers. But the people who support the law, who have good non-homophobic reasons for doing so, are fighting a maddening battle with people who won't even tell the truth about what the law does and should know better, and that's the fault of the people who've lied about it. Frankly, anyone who thinks it's a good idea for kids in grades K through 3 to receive instruction from public school teachers on sex and sexuality has some uncomfortable explaining to do. Most people wouldn't defend the position. They don't even know what they're doing it. Dismissing the punching back against the serial dishonesty about this bill as warmed over homophobia is perpetuating the dishonesty that led us to this point. If you're in the media and covering the story, you've got an obligation to do better with the facts. That's my buddy Leon Wolf on Twitter, and he's right. I mean, this ultimately is the issue. The law simply prohibits public school teachers from teaching about sex and sexuality to kindergarten through third grade. You can in fourth grade under the law, and some people don't even want that, but the law went K through 3. And the media did not want to talk about it that way. What the media chose to talk about it as is, this is a bill where you're not allowed to say you're gay to your students. Was never true. Was never true. But that's how the media and the left characterized it. When you ask parents, do you want public school teachers teaching your kids about sex in kindergarten? Overwhelmingly, parents say no. But the media and the Democrats are in the same bubble, and this has a larger implication for the Democratic Party. There's already a backlash growing about schools in the country. There's already an education backlash happening. And the reality is the Democrats and the media are in a bubble where they don't understand or appreciate the backlash. And the loudest voices within the Democratic Party and the media are the ones who are opposed to this backlash, who think there should be no backlash, who think what public schools have been doing is legitimate and we should be defending them. And so they are advancing the narratives that attack parents and attack decency standards across the country that parents support. And the Democrats listen to those voices because the other voices aren't in the bubble. And so they begin to attack as well, and they lie, and the media lies with them. If you oppose the legislation in Florida, if you don't support it, I don't think you're a groomer or a pedophile. But I also don't think you really understand what the law says because the media has flagrantly refused to be honest. And the reason there is a pushback from the right calling these people groomers, for those of you who don't know what grooming is, it's a process by which someone gets a child comfortable with the idea of being sexually abused so that they don't realize they're being sexually abused, or comfortable with being in a cult in ways that it detaches them from reality of what is acceptable. When you're teaching kindergartners about sex, which some teachers in Florida had done, it begins to get those kids comfortable with those sorts of ideas and make sex a more permissive topic for a young person, which then makes the deviant people of society more likely to probably go try to proceed to groom those kids. That's why they're calling it a groomer bill or anti-groomer bill. You can disagree with the characterization, but you should at least be willing to acknowledge that teaching a kindergartner about sex probably isn't a wise way to handle kindergarten. The media, however, can't do that. They can't because they're so in the bubble with the Democrats. And again, this gets back to the larger problem here that you really need to understand, particularly if you're a Democrat, you need to understand this problem. You have no one within your tent willing to tell you what you're doing deviates from the mainstream of America. You don't. There is another policy here, completely removed from sex: gas prices. The Democrats are so convinced that everyone wants immediate clean energy and everyone can afford a Tesla because everyone in their circle of friends can afford a Tesla. They're okay with higher gas prices. You have Pete Buttigieg going out saying essentially that the pain is the point. Keeping gas prices high will convert people to having to buy electric cars or just stop driving, and that's good for the environment. And the Democrats think this is a good thing because there's no one in their bubble to tell them otherwise. There's no one in the Democratic bubble to tell them that Latinx is an insulting phrase that they should not use within the Hispanic Latino community. There's no one there to tell them that, and so they keep doing it. A bunch of white progressives do this. And there's no one in their bubble to confront them. And so now in Florida, there's a real culture war fight. Now, keep in mind, they can say that the Republicans here passing this law are the culture warriors, but it's not the conservatives who decided to rush into kindergarten to teach kids about sex. It's the Democrats who decided to do that. It's progressive teachers who decided to do that. There are random documentation regularly now on Twitter about teachers of elementary school kids who have TikTok accounts who are bragging about teaching their kids about these things to make them comfortable with it. Because the parents and the teachers' minds aren't doing it. I can't play you the audio of some of these things because there's so much profanity in it. Couldn't allow it on terrestrial radio. But there's an account called Libs of TikTok. You go on Twitter, you find this account. You go on TikTok and find it as well. And they document these crazy teachers of elementary school students who really believe that the best way to build acceptance of transgenderism and homosexuality in the country is to go on in kindergarten and start indoctrinating children into acceptable conduct and phraseology. Believe it or not, a lot of parents who are open-minded, tolerant, and pro-gay rights don't want their kindergartners taught anal sex. And the media and the Democrats can't figure that out. That's the most bizarre thing here. I read you all these headlines. From the Washington Post to MSNBC to CNN and all points in between. That Republican conservatives, they're going all QAnon, accusing everyone of pedophilia. That's not it. But by the way, I got to tell you something that's somewhat mean of me. If you're going to lie about the legislation, and you're going to lie about the people advancing the legislation, don't be surprised when they lie about you. Don't be surprised when they take your taxes back. No, you shouldn't lie. You should tell the truth. But I have a hard time getting upset about a bunch of Republicans calling these people groomers and pedophiles after 3 months of sustained attacks against them for wanting this piece of legislation passed, for mischaracterizing the law, for mischaracterizing the supporters of the law, for mischaracterizing what the law actually does. I got a hard time being really upset about this. You reap what you sow. And they're reaping a lot right now, and they're upset about it. The Washington Post is upset about it. But there's the larger issue here. And this goes back to, in 24 hours, we've had all these headlines on the same story from a bunch of media outlets. That tells me that this isn't some sort of organic thing where one person said something and the next person said, oh yeah, I think I'm going to take that tack too, which is usually what happens. That tells me that somewhere these conversations are being had, either in a Slack chat or an email or something, between progressives and reporters, and all the reporters are getting their talking points and they're going out and running these stories and these headlines. And that tells me that the Democrats can't escape their bubble. They can't escape their bubble on this issue. They can't escape this bubble on gas prices. They can't escape this bubble on education issues in general. They can't escape this bubble on defunding the police and crime and taxes. If they're that far into the bubble that you can have major media outlets in less than 24 hours all run the same story, unquestioned, with the same talking point, none of which is true, they have no recognition of the red wave coming in November that's going to wipe them out. They think it's all messaging, and you hear this from Democrats now. The problem is messaging. The problem isn't messaging. The problem is you've lost touch with the heartland. You've lost touch with the voters. You've lost touch with everyone except people in your Slack group. And in November, you will see just how badly out of touch you are. But don't worry. You'll never have to realize it. What you'll do instead is go to the next talking point, that the Republicans changed the law and stole the vote. It'll be the Democrats in November claiming Republicans stole the vote and suppressed the vote. They will never have to actually rationalize, realize, recognize, or admit just how out of touch they've become with the American people, to the extent that Democrats and the media seem to think that parents are okay with teaching their kindergartners about sex. And you're a bigot if you think otherwise. I don't understand how they think this is going to work. There's real damage to be done here to the Democrats. I'm kind of enjoying watching this happen. But if they can't realize what a bubble they're in, they've got bigger problems. And this is the beginning of something far worse for them to come.